Now, with Ecclesiastes chapter 7, we're going to get some more answers or some ideas out of all this existential crisis we've had up to this point of these chapters of what's the point of this life? What's the point of doing things in this life? If we're not doing good, what does it really profit us? So chapter 7 is going to give us a few answers to this. So verse 1, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Do you believe that a good name, a good reputation is better than owning valuable possessions? Yes or no in the comments. That'll be interesting to see. Verse 2, it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. So the house of mourning was a place where they would go to mourn. They would go through a ritual mourning process and everything else. So he says it's better to go there to mourn your loss than it is to be gluttonous, to go to the house of feasting. Because the feasting is what's going to kill you. If you go to the mourning, you learn from your mistakes or learn from others and you come out the better. Verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better. Now, I think there's some good value in this. I don't know if saying we should always be sad is really what they're trying to get at with this, honestly. But getting to the idea of realizing that this life isn't all about just, laughter and fun and goofing off and just doing whatever you want. That there's a reality to this life. And the more we understand that and are willing to acknowledge and work with that, then the better it'll be in the long run. Verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. So again, this idea of physical attributes, possessions and things versus taking the time to deal with suffering and sadness in life. Verse 5, it is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. I think that's a very good one. Hearing good feedback from people, learning from people who genuinely care and want to help us is important. If we reject all feedback just because it's somebody else's opinion, is not good. And we see this, we see this kind of stuff all the time, like on TV, on YouTube, these shows where they're like, nah, you're not going to tell me what to do. It's like, come on, people. Listen to each other. Learn to work together. Stop trying to be an expert unto yourself. Work together. Now, verse 6, for as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. So this is the second time he's brought around this idea of it's better, you're better at the end. One, you've learned. If you're starting like birth, you have the learning to go through. So it's nice to get through the learning and have it done, basically, than going through it. And oppression does make a wise man mad because, again, wise men are people who are seeking agency and choice. They can think. They can make choices and decisions and evaluate things, think critically, discuss things, understand what's going on. And oppression wants to destroy all that. Same as like a gift. If you give somebody a gift, it destroys the heart. People get beholden to getting stuff. Eventually, they don't care. They just want the stuff. Now, moving on here, verse 9. Let's see. Yes, verse 9. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So that's good advice right there. Do not be quick to anger. That's where you foolish people live. That's where you get problems. Verse 10, say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. So this is looking into the past. Why was it better back then than it was today? He says, don't worry yourself too much about that. Now, verse 11, wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. So it's good to learn because you can think, you can reason, you can evaluate what's going on. Money is a good defense because you can use it for resources, but realizing that the value of wisdom is what it does to bless your life, not the wisdom itself, but how does it bless you and how can you bless others with it? Just like money. Verse 13, consider the work of God, for who can make that straight, which he hath made crooked? So if God's built something that's crooked, who's going to correct God in what he does? That's not what wisdom's for, is to say, I think God's wrong, we should do it this way. That's not what it is. That's going to get you into trouble. Verse 14, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider. God also has set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. So in the day of prosperity, be joyful, but the day of adversity, consider. I like that. This is kind of the Oedipus Rex type ideas. You never know what fate's going to bring to people. So celebrate the wins when they come and mourn the losses when they come, because they'll both happen, just at different times for different people. Verse 15, all things have I seen in the days of my vanity, and there is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prolongeth his life in wickedness. There's a really interesting point. So a just man, a righteous man, lives his life and still dies. A wicked man tries to avoid death, tries to prolong his life, and he just prolongs the opportunities for him to be wicked because he doesn't want to stop. And I think a lot of that comes down to realizing that this life is temporary for a reason. And it's what we do with this life that makes a difference. So if you have a wicked life, you don't want to die. For one, what you enjoy doing, you can't do in the next life. And two, you're going to have to answer for everything you've done in this life. And it's not going to work out so well. So you're kind of afraid of the next life. Whereas a just person does his best and let the chips lie. You know, there's so much information about being healthy, and I think it's important to be healthy. It's important that we improve our health. But improving our health isn't the main thing. Just like building wealth is nice, it's great, but it's not the main thing of this life. It all goes away eventually. Knowing how to be the best martial artist is awesome. Good on you. But that doesn't matter after you're dead. So what good is that? I mean, let's prioritize and make sure the things of God are taken care of before we really focus on the things of this world, basically. So let's see. Verse 16, be not righteous over much, neither make thyself over wise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? But be not over much wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? So it's fascinating. 16 and 17 are contraries of each other, if you will. So in verse 16, don't be righteous over a lot of stuff. Don't make yourself too wise. Don't spend too much time studying. And then verse 17, don't rule over wickedness either, and don't be an idiot. So there's the extremes. Go in between these two, basically. Verse 18, it is good that thou shouldest take hold of this. Yea, also from this withdraw not thine hand. For he that feareth God shall come forth of them all. Okay, that's just how it works out. Very important, okay? It is good that thou shouldest take hold of this. Yea, withdraw not thine hand. So fearing God is respecting God, basically. And that's better that we are respecting God because he will help us. Now, verse 9, wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in the city. For there is not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. So again, being wise is important, and even people who are super strong, if you're wise, sometimes you can actually build things or do things to outsmart the strong. Being just strong is nice, but if you don't have the wisdom to understand what you can do with that strength, you're going to be limited to just what you think. If all you are is tough, you're going to miss the opportunities. So, and verse 20 is a good reality, realizing that basically we all fall short of perfection. We all sin. We all have struggles. So he says in verse 21, also take no heed unto all words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee. For oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise hast cursed others. So don't be too hasty about what people say. We all know inside ourselves, we say stuff that it would be totally inappropriate to say out loud. We say stuff about people inside ourselves that would be rude to say outside. So don't be too hasty when somebody actually says out loud the part they shouldn't have, basically. Now, verse 23, all this have I provided by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? I applied mine heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, and to know the wickedness of folly, even the foolishness and madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her. This is, of course, verse 26 is getting into this idea of infidelity, adultery, fornications, somebody who is trying to convince you to fulfill the lusts of the flesh. This is, of course, coming from a man's standpoint, blaming a prostitute or a woman for trapping him, for luring him in and destroying him, basically. Because he says here, those who please God, if you do what God says, you will not fall into this woman's traps. You will be able to survive this. If you don't, if you're a sinner, if you're not following God, she is going to destroy you more. Basically, you're going to fall into more sin. And I think we should turn this verse the other way as well, and think about a woman from a female standpoint. What does this mean as well when we think about a man who is entrapping a woman? Most of the time, I think when we look at these things, most of the time we see this from the standpoint again of a man, because he has that strength, that aggressiveness, that he doesn't try to seduce a woman. He just imposes himself onto her, which is completely inappropriate. Whereas women can't necessarily do that. It's hard for a woman to just impose herself on a man. So what she does is uses subtlety to convince a man. She has those natural abilities. Men are strong, women are smart, if you think about it. In fact, the word for wisdom in the scriptures is usually Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. So when you talk about having wisdom more than strength, I think there's more of a feminine principle or idea that goes along with that as well. Now verse 27, behold, this I have found, that saith the preacher, counting one by one to find out the account, which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those have I not found. Lo, this is only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So we are made, God has put us on this earth, He has created us, but we struggle with finding the wisdom to understand God. And we tend to spend this life not focusing on the things of God, but spend this life focusing on our own ideas, our own inventions, as it says there in that last verse. So realize, again, priorities. If that's one thing we could learn from Ecclesiastes all the way through, is priorities. What is really, really important in life? And how can we move in that direction? How can we have more of that in our life? Is the thing to think about. Well, let's jump to our next chapter as we continue to move forward.